Hello, everyone. Welcome to BIM Harambe Africa. I am your host, Ginika Egwuonwu, founder and managing director of Links and Bridges, and I'll be taking you through this presentation on getting real about challenges of BIM implementation in Africa. But before we go into it, let me give you a brief description or history about who I am. I started out as a quantity surveyor about 10 years ago and went from quantity surveying to construction project management. From construction project management, I decided to start my own construction company or construction consulting company as I saw a gap and a need in the market. Links and Bridges focuses on construction problem solving in the areas of construction cost management, administration, and project delivery, as well as the effective adoption of technology within businesses. So with that being said, let's get right into it. I decided to rephrase this question and rather trim it down to challenges of building information model of management and its implementation in Africa. Now, let's zoom in a little further and focus on the word information management. What about information management? I think there is a big disconnect when it comes to information management. What is causing this disconnection? What do I mean? I have listed 8 areas I believe contributes to the big disconnection of the effective information management and its implementation in Africa. Basically, the challenges of BIM implementation in Africa. And the first one I would like to bring to attention is the one I call a contractual divide. What do I mean by a contractual divide? A contractual divide is the division created as a result of the construction procurement method that the client has embarked on bringing his or her vision to life. What does that mean? We'll dive into it a little further in the discussion. I'm going to right now focus on 3 of the 8 areas. The second one is fragmentation. Again, what do I mean by fragmentation? Fragmentation, or the disjointed communication that happens on the project, in my opinion, is as a result of the different local forms of data management that happens on a construction project. On average, a company or a person that is working on a project could be using 6 different applications. And these applications are non-intelligent applications, so they don't necessarily track information or track information as an intelligent application would be, like your Excel, your Word, your PowerPoint, etc. You may be working with all these different applications individually on a construction project. The next one I call is a low barrier to entry. So let's focus on these 3 areas first. Let me paint you a picture. On a typical construction project, you would have your client. Your client and his or her internal team gets together. They have a project that is strategic in line with their portfolio. They go through the internal process, and the funding is released and approved for this particular project to come to life. Then the client goes ahead and procures an architect to design and bring this brief into existence. The architect designs a model or designs the plans, and the client goes ahead, brings in a quantity surveyor to put an estimate or a budget to this design. Now, depending on what happens, there might be a few iterations that happens at this stage, meaning the first, usually maybe the first estimate that the QS puts on for attached to the design is not exactly lining up with what the client had initially imagined from a budget perspective. So an iteration happens here where costs needs to be trimmed down, certain designs need to be changed to accommodate what could potentially happen. Then the client could go ahead and bring in the construction project manager, who brings in the rest of the team. At this particular point in time, you have the design team on the client side. Then the design team goes ahead and does a little more detailing of this project. They assemble a little more information, and we go out to tender. So we look in the contractor. The contractor is on the other side of the fence and not necessarily on the client side, because they go into contract with, they sign a contract with the client. The contractor comes with his own team. He comes to review domestic teams, let's say tiler, builder, some labor, some painting, etc. He comes with his team. And at some point in time, as the construction project progresses, we could bring on nominated or selected subcontractors. Now, nominated or selected subcontractor is a term used by the JBCC. For those of you that don't know what the JBCC is, it's a construction contract mainly used in Southern Africa. It's very popular here in South Africa. And it just means that these are contractors brought in to execute specialist items. And why we do this sometimes is to make sure that the client has as much control to the different aspects of the construction cost as possible. This is where I introduce the concept of the contractual design. So on the one side, you have the client's team responsible for the design. And on the other hand, you have the executing team of the design. So the execution of the design is on the one side, while the design team is on the other side. And what this creates is an adversarial environment. So you have the people that are responsible for the design on the client side. And what that creates is, should something go wrong on the project, these parties become liable, because it gives the contractor a footing to go after the client, which could cost a lot of money. So this contractual setup, or this traditional procurement method, fosters an adversarial way of executing a project. It is anti-collaborative. You know, everyone acts in such a way where they're trying to cover their bases to make sure that in a case of litigation, so people already have litigation at the top of their mind from the onset of the project, instead of a collaborative environment where there's a shared interest in ensuring that the project comes to life. But this particular setup, you don't really find that interest of ensuring the project comes to life, except from an ethical point of view, where the design team, whoever it may be, has a certain standard and service to maintain and name to maintain. That could be the only driving or motivating factor. So let us reimagine what a different contractual setup would look like, so that you can understand my point a bit further. Imagine if the contractor, who is the executing design, comes with the design team. This is a much better setup, because now the construction contract, the contract is just between the client and the contractor, and the design team, as well as the execution of design, are on the same side. This environment fosters collaboration, because there's shared risk and potentially shared profits, whether it's shared or losses. So this becomes a greater incentive over and above executing or bringing a certain level of service to the client or to the project. There's also a greater incentive to ensure that the project is successfully implemented, number one, because nobody wants to, because they become partly responsible for the failure or for the success of the project. So there's a greater incentive to ensure that this project is delivered properly, efficiently, and there's profits to it. Number two, fragmentation, disjointed communication. That's what I call it. Let me paint the picture for you. Here's your client and his team. They're using a minimum of 6 programs or applications. They're working on Outlook, they're working on Excel, they're working on Word, they're working on PowerPoint, etc. This is a localized data management system. The information stays on or with the client, and some of it is passed on to the architect. The architect comes on board. He or she is also using a minimum of 6 plus WhatsApp, as well as the actual design tools, and information is circulating amongst this local data management system within the company. Then maybe you bring in a project manager, same thing. The information is all localized and is decentralized. There isn't a common environment where the information concerning the project is shared. all the way from the presentations to the cost management to tracking, etc. And these platforms do not have intelligent programming to them. So there is nothing that is ensuring that there aren't information, tracking that there isn't information falling through the loopholes as it goes from one team to the next team. Same thing, you bring in the other professional team, same thing. Everyone is using different applications to communicate or execute the project. This is where the fragmentation comes in. Now, let's bring in the contractor. The contractor also has a system, his or her system, same problem. And he also has a team he also has a portion of his team that is excluded from the digital platform, excluded from the digital realm. So you have a gaping hole when it comes to communication amongst the contractor's team or the builder's team, in which case that the way information is passed on to the sector of the to the sector of the team is more like a face-to-face type communication. He still has his subcontractors. They also have their environment in which they speak. So what you see right here is a fragmentation of information. It's a disjointed way of communication, and guaranteed there will be information missed because there is nothing tracking it. There isn't a collective system or a common data environment specifically for this project. Now, that's my second point. The third point is the barrier to entry, a low barrier to entry. That is what I said. First of all, let's look at the client side. The client comes with his professional team, and these guys, before they can operate in the capacity in which they operate in, or in the role in which they operate in, they have to have gone to a higher institution of learning or tertiary level. So it requires them to receive some kind of formal training and formal education, quite theoretical in nature, as well as involved with some practical aspects, but mainly theoretical and formalized education. Meanwhile, on the contractor side, the contractor comes in with his team, and if you're in certain countries, the age to get into the workforce, or the educational level you require to get into the workforce, is sometimes as low as primary school. So on the construction side, on the contractor side, or the labor side, you have guys with a primary school education who had to abandon their education for whatever reason and get into the workforce. So they go through some kind of apprenticeship type program, learn a trade and or two, and next thing they're in the construction industry. Their form of education does not necessarily encourage the use of digital platforms. That's number one. It doesn't encourage the use of, or does not teach them certain administrative theories or skill sets as you would get if you were on the client side of the team, which is the professional team. But nonetheless, everyone, from both the guy that stopped at primary school to the guy that has a master's, is all working on this project, and we're all working together to bring the project to life. So why does this matter? You may think, okay, the main contractor is a guy that needs to have a certain level of education, which is true. There are two paths that generally is followed. So it's either he's gone through the trade school and he's learned the practical side of construction, learned as he went, as he grew up, as he went along, and doesn't really have that much information or learning on the administrative side of construction, or the theoretical knowledge which they would teach at a higher level of higher institution, level of learning institution. He may not necessarily have it, but he's got all the practical knowledge and he understands how to build. Or you can have the guy who went to school to study this. He has all the theoretical knowledge, the latest theory on administration and all of that, but not enough practical experience. So these are one of two ways that, generally speaking, that the contractor could go on a path on. There's also another way, but let's dive into it. Let's look at the contractor's development and progress. Let's start. So let's say the typical contractor, let's say he's a medium-sized guy. He's got his team of builders, domestic contractors or domestic builders that he contracts with. So they're little teams of tradesmen. So for example, let's use the painting guy. So the painting guy has been painting for a while. He learned painting at a trade school. He's been doing it for a while. He wants to expand and he wants to grow his business. So he decides, you know what, I'm going to branch off and I'm going to get a team behind me of other trades guy, and I'm going to become the point of contact and become a contractor. So he's moved on to becoming a small scaled contractor. He gets a few work here and there. He learns through experience. He has a better understanding of integrating other trades that weren't really his area of expertise. He's now well vested in how to make and coordinate construction on site and to bring it to life. But remember this, he's still highly technical, highly practical, and may be lacking or is lacking when it comes to the administrative theoretical side of construction. But he progresses as he continues to do work, as he continues to grow. He gets good, maybe increases his client base, he increases the amount of money he's able to manage through the projects he's executed, and he's executing, and he goes from small to medium size. Now let's go back to the guy that was he initially broke out of. This guy also continues his business, continues executing projects, and the type of projects he executes gets more complicated, gets bigger in terms of the budget size, and somehow he now moves and elevates from being a medium-sized contractor to a larger size contractor, being able to handle certain types of work. So this is one of the ways that the contractor could progress. There are other ways as well. For example, in countries like South Africa, where there is an incentive for people to get into construction, especially Black-owned construction businesses or Black female-owned construction businesses, you have a scenario of people from a different industry getting into the construction industry. For example, I'm an HR specialist consultant. I've stayed in this industry for maybe 15 years, and I see that there's an opportunity for I see that government places a higher preference on Black female-owned construction companies. You look around and you say, there aren't that many. I can do this, and you leave your HR consulting career and you decide to open or own a construction business. You get into the business and you are at a position or in a position where you don't really have the technical know-how or practical work experience of how to build, and you also don't have the theoretical knowledge that one would have when they go through a university program focused on construction management. So except you bring in the right team to support you, you're already at a disadvantage. And that could cause problems in the way you execute your projects, which could affect your project cost and your project budget, as well as quality. Another way which sometimes happens in different construction industries across Africa is where you have a very decentralized system. So because the construction industry is not necessarily regulated, you don't have this formal setup of a main contractor and domestic contractors. That could only happen or probably happens in cases of medium to larger size companies or construction companies, which are sometimes foreign, sometimes are locally owned, but these guys focus on the larger projects that happen within the country. But the ones that are between the medium to the small size enterprises or construction businesses that focus on a lot smaller projects like residential projects, it's very difficult to find a unified system or centralized system as I've just set up now. For example, I'm the client and I've decided I want to build a new home. So what usually would happen in certain African countries, in certain West African and probably Central African countries, is that the client will procure an architect to do the design. And the client then becomes the project manager and the QS, and they go ahead and they procure the different trades that need to happen, or different parts of the construction that needs to happen by themselves. And these projects could take anything from 1 year to 10 to 15 years, 20 years, depending on how the cash flow of the client goes and how urgently they need this building. The client goes, gets the foundation done. They literally go and they source them. So the client also becomes the main contractor or becomes the contract administrator, which creates a perfect recipe for a perfect recipe for disaster. But these are methods and ways of executing projects that is happening in certain parts of Africa. So it's very decentralized. First of all, you have to formalize or centralize the system to be able to even create a common data environment, a better working condition. Now, let's move on to the other aspects of what could possibly happen. The big disconnect. Let's go back to the other points that we still need to speak about, which is insufficient skills as well as finding the right digital talent. What does that mean? The industry is known to not have sufficient skill sets. So there are key skills required within the construction industry that we don't have enough of, or we don't have good quality workmanship in those areas. And as a result, you have construction projects or construction teams producing poor quality and not being effectively managed because the necessary skill sets to bring the construction project to life are not readily available. There may be lots of construction workers or people within that field just not sufficiently skilled enough to the level and standard that is required of them. The next one is the right digital talents. We are moving from one era to a new era, which is a digital, not just digital, but the fourth industrial revolution. What does that mean? That is basically digital or AI, artificial intelligence, being able to make decisions autonomously without the input of human beings. But the construction industry is still at a stage where we are we're still a bit far in terms of productivity, in terms of growth, in terms of innovation. We're still behind as compared to your other industries like finance, manufacturing, etc. But as a result of the pandemic and the crisis and COVID, a lot of businesses that were traditionally steeped in very manual processes have been catapulted or forced to find a way of getting into the digital realm or digital space. So it is more of a reality for us as an industry that we need to adapt. We need talent and skill sets that can effectively manage construction projects from a digital perspective. We need the right digital talent, which is a bridge between the construction know-how, technical know-how, and as well as the digital world. The next one, which I'm going to talk about, is manual. I briefly touched on it in my previous topic. The industry is highly manual, and this can be traced back to the fact, or traced back to how the contractors are ushered into the construction path or journey, where some of them come from a learning background that did not necessarily encourage the adoption of digital or digital means or digital platforms. So they come from that environment, and as a result of that, they're still very manual in the way they do things, because the digital platform or digital realm feels very foreign to them. So they stick to what they know, which is on-site, practical knowledge, hard copies being used on their construction project. Another concept I think that is contributing to this divide is a lack of legislative backing. Some countries on the continent have governments that have, or legislation that institutes or regulates the construction industry. In those cases, all they would need to do is now further mandate the effective use of BIM on projects, so that it's not just a case of saying, okay, this is the way you guys operate, but this is how you need to start operating. This would add tremendous value or contribution to the effective use of BIM on the continent. The other challenge, or in other parts of Africa, you do not have legislation that regulates the construction industry. So you do not have regulated activities. Case in point, the example of the decentralized way of construction of building in certain West African countries, like in Nigeria. So a lack of regulation to this or for this activity really opens or leaves room for great problems, all sorts of problems. Let's have a look full picture of what these 8 areas of disconnection is. Number 1, and a quick recap. Number 1 is the contractual divide. 2, fragmentation. 3, barrier, a low barrier to entry. 4, insufficient skills. 5, we don't have the right digital talent. 6, industry is highly manual. 7, we need legislative backing. And 8, we need to regulate construction activities in certain countries. That was a mouthful. So we've gone through all the challenges, and I don't think it would be a full or complete picture if we go through the challenges and we do not discuss the solutions. So here is the solution for building information model or management and its implementation in Africa. Number 1, I think the first thing we need to do is create a collaboration-friendly contract. So we need to move, which is what we discussed earlier on, we need to move from that traditional procurement method, which goes through the whole, contractors on one side with the execution team, clients on the other side with the design team, fostering an adversarial environment and a lack of collaboration, which at the end of the day affects everyone, including the client, because the execution of the project is not as smooth as it could be. And to enable this, we need contracts like your design and build and the turnkey that puts both design and the execution of the design on the same team, on the same side of the contractual fence. This is a greater incentive for collaboration and effective execution of the project, because there's shared risk. The second one is streamlining communication. Now, we need a common data environment. And this is the aspect or area that a lot of people think of when they think BIM, they think software. This is just a portion of the problem, right? Or the portion of the piece of the puzzle. Streamlining communication or creating a common data environment can be done with a lot of software out there. We have Oracle, Econex, we have different Autodesk applications that we can use to create a common data environment and to avoid that situation that we initially discussed that showed the different local data management that happens on a construction project. So this will play a vital role in solving that problem. The next thing we can do is education all across. So we have to find a way of educating that contractor who is very good at building because he's learned how to build. He has all the practical knowledge on how to build, but he's seriously lacking on the theoretical and administrative side of construction. We need to find a way of educating him about the concepts and the principles of BIM in a way that he understands, as well as pulling him along in terms of information and understanding on certain principles on construction administration. The next one is we need to find sufficient skill sets. How do we do that? Is either we upskill the current labor force that we have, reskill and upskill, or we outsource. Right? Digital talent. This is an opportunity for people to move, this is a career opportunity for people to explore this avenue, seeing as the way of working is changing and will continue to change, moving away from manual to the digital economy or digital realm or digital platform. Then we need to help businesses, existing businesses that do things in a very manual way to digitize. We need to go from a very manual way of execution and get them into the online economy or get them onto digital platforms. The seventh one is legislative backing. Now, we need advocates, lobbyists, people that have the influence to speak to governments to create some kind of legislation that enforces the use of BIM. building information model or management on projects, so that these different areas and actors can all come together. And in countries where things are not regulated, activities are not regulated, we need regulations. Those countries need legislation to regulate the construction industry and to avoid the massive losses that happen within them. Thank you very much for going on this journey with me. It's been a pleasure sharing these ideas with you. I hope you got great insight, and you can follow me on LinkedIn. My name is Ginika Egwuonwu. You can also visit my website, www.linksnbridges.com. One word, www.linksnbridges.com. And I hope to see you soon, probably on a different platform. Till then, stay well. Cheers.